Could this be the Big 12 championship game preview? Maybe. Hello, everybody. You're listening to the College Sports Superfan. And today we're going to preview number 12 Utah at number 14 Oklahoma State. Incredible matchup. Incredible matchup. There's so much to get into here that makes it so intriguing. First thing I want to say is that Utah is only a 1.5 point favorite. So either way you go with this one, according to the bettors, this is going to be close. It's pretty much a toss-up, essentially. But let's talk about these two teams and what makes them so interesting and what makes each one so different. Utah's defense has been elite so far, but they haven't faced the toughest competition, but it has still been elite, only giving up 11 points per game. But what is worrisome about Utah is that they just had their worst defensive performance against Utah State and allowed 21 points. Interesting thing about Utah State, as I mentioned in the previous video, USC played Utah State and gave up 0 points. So that's kind of shocking. You'd expect it to be the other way around based on how those two teams have played in recent years. But Utah gave up 21 points, and the other thing that is interesting is Oklahoma State's offense has been insane. And typically under Mike Gundy, their offenses have been incredible in years past. That's typically not a surprise, but 42.7 points per game. 42.7 points per game is insane. And they've surprisingly been way more pass heavy. Heading into this season, based on what we saw from Oklahoma State last year, they had Ollie Gordon, who was the best running back in the country for sure last season. Absolutely. Was a sleeper Heisman candidate. And he's a sleeper Heisman candidate heading into this season as well. And Alan Bowman was coming back at quarterback. And honestly, Bowman has just been more of a game manager, and I've never been too terribly impressed with him. And I was like, really? He's coming back for a seventh year of college football? But wow, he has impressed me this season. Alan Bowman has been really, really, really good. We'll get into some of his numbers in a second, but his numbers are absolutely fantastic. Didn't want to say the Cowboys defense, little concerning. They're giving up 20 points per game and 305 passing yards per game. So this is a great opportunity for Cam Rising, who's also a seventh-year veteran quarterback. Kind of crazy. We have a matchup of two 7-year college quarterbacks, which really shouldn't even happen, but somehow in the weird circumstances because of injuries and COVID and other things that have occurred, that's what has happened. So each has an old head coach, each has an old quarterback. And the thing about Rising is he is going to play. Just wanted to say that he is going to be available. He did hurt his hand earlier in the season, but he is going to be available after a tough collision against Baylor. But Cam Rising, he's been really, really, really good. 7 touchdown passes, averaging nearly 12 yards per pass and no interceptions. So he's been throwing the ball downfield with lots of success and hasn't been turning the ball over. That's really, really good. And then Micah Bernard at running back has made this team really well balanced. He's got 274 yards and a touchdown. And then to talk about the receiving core for Utah, it's really underrated. This is a good receiving core. Money Parks has been a star wide receiver, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. They also have Dorian Singer, who comes over from USC after he wasn't getting enough playing time there. He's a good, talented receiver. And then they have tight end Brant Keithy, who has 142 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he's probably going to be off to the NFL, after this season is done based on how he has played. So Utah's offense, it's been really good. They've got a lot of good weapons. It's been very well balanced, much more well balanced than Oklahoma State, which again is a surprise. Ollie Gordon has kind of been off to a slow start this season, but who hasn't been off to a slow start has been Alan Bowman. Listen to this. I was mentioning him earlier. He has just under 1,000 passing yards so far and 9 passing touchdowns with only 2 interceptions. He has just been a gunslinger so far. Ollie Gordon, on the other hand, he only has 194 yards, but he does have three rushing touchdowns. He also has a short yardage receiving touchdown as well. So he does have four total touchdowns through three games. But overall, he hasn't been dominant, but he could kick that in at any point. Let's talk about these Oklahoma State receivers, which have just been amazing, including Dejon Stribling, who's been really good. He's emerged in his junior season to be a superstar. He currently has 295 yards and two touchdowns, and then Rashad Owens has 188 yards and a touchdown. Both of those wide receivers are averaging around 17 yards per catch. So they're getting the ball and making things happen. And then you also can't forget about Brennan Presley, who's another senior who's been around for a little while. 172 yards and three receiving touchdowns. So Bowman's he's got multiple weapons and he's been slinging it to them and they've had a lot of success, a lot of success. This receiving core is very good. Here's the fascinating thing in their series history. Utah and Oklahoma State have only played one time in their series history before this moment, 1945. Oklahoma State won 46 to 6. What's fascinating about 1945, Oklahoma State fans? That's the year that you won the national championship. Your one and only football national championship. So the last time Oklahoma State played Utah, they went and won the whole thing. Can the same thing happen this year? It's very possible. It's not out of the cards. Let me get into the concern for each team, though. Here's the concern for Utah. The Utes gave up 245 passing yards to Utah State. Again, Utah State is kind of in shambles. They're not that great of a team this year. And the secondary for Utah just hasn't looked as great as it has in years past. And now they're going up against Alan Bowman, who I just talked about his numbers, nearly 1,000 yards, nearly double-digit touchdowns in just a few games. Bowman has been incredible, and his receivers are all so good. So that's going to be really tough for this Utah secondary, which to me has struggled a little bit. But now here's the big concern for Oklahoma State. They don't have. It's not like they don't have weaknesses either. Utah has been way more well disciplined, which is what you would expect from a Kyle Whittingham led squad. The Utes beat Utah State because the Aggies had nine penalties, nine to Utah's one. The Cowboys are coming off of a dominant game against Tulsa, but dropped one spot in the rankings. And you're probably wondering why. Well, one big reason why is because Oklahoma State committed nine penalties against Tulsa. Very undisciplined. Even though they dominated, they could have dominated by a lot more because they shot themselves in the foot constantly. They also had six penalties against Arkansas, and then they also had five penalties in their first matchup of the season. So they've been having a lot of penalties throughout the year. Uh, Actually, excuse me, no, that was about a separate thing. But they had six penalties against Arkansas and nine penalties against Tulsa. They actually only had one penalty in their first game of the year. And Ollie Gordon, as I've said it many times throughout this video, I sound like a broken record at this point, but he just has not been his dominant self so far. And Utah has a very stout rushing defense. So I'm worried about Oklahoma State being too one dimensional and be too focused on the pass and putting everything on the shoulders of Alan Bowman to win this game. But here's my prediction for this one. What do I think is going to happen? Who's going to win this battle that could be the Big 12 championship preview? Of course, Kansas State also in the mix in that too. What do I think is going to happen here? Well, the Cam Rising injury, it is a hand injury. It does worry me a little bit. So that makes me a little wary. And assuming that the Cowboys do not commit the same level of dumb penalties, which I'm sure Mike Gundy, an experienced head coach, is drilling into them right now. Assuming they don't commit the dumb penalties, I believe Oklahoma State wins this game in a close one at home. I say Oklahoma State wins by 3. This will be a thrilling battle. Really excited for it. And they've got another big game the next week against Kansas State as well, so they can't overlook this one and start getting ready for the next team. But I believe as long as they stay more disciplined than they've been the last 2 weeks and kind of more like they were in week 1, I think they'll end up winning this game in a close one, and Alan Bowman will continue to light up that Utah secondary with all of his talented receivers. All right, that is my predictions. Keep staying tuned for the Bunley game of the week, which is going to be, as you probably guessed, the Tennessee at Oklahoma game. And then also stay tuned for the fan game of the week, which is yet to be determined, but you can vote in the poll. But most likely it will be NC State at number 21, Clemson. All right, thank you guys so much for listening and continue to support the college sports superfan.